Hello, this is Rob Sparks, and I'd like to welcome you to this uh, live from NOIRLab at Kitt Peak. I'm your host, Rob Sparks. We have our moderator, Jamaica Marshall, here, and our guest today is Dr. Connie Walker of NOIRLab Tucson. Today, we're going to be hearing about the importance of dark skies. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can enter them in the chat box and we will relay them to Connie. And if you'll excuse me for a moment, I just need to kill that. So this is our first live from NOIRLab at Kitt Peak. So today I would like to actually talk to you just a little bit about Kitt Peak here. And I'm going to have to stop the, I'm having audio issues here. I'm getting feedback from my microphone and it's actually playing this in my ear about 20 seconds later than it actually should be, and I can't get it to stop doing that. So let me try this here. I will be with you in just a moment, I hope. Okay. Okay, did that do it is the question. And if so, let me get back to my script here. Okay, anyway, Kitt Peak National Observatory was founded in 1958. It was built on land leased from the Tohono O'odham Nation, and we are indebted to them for letting us use their sacred mountain for astronomical research. So there are 24 optical telescopes and 2 radio telescopes on Kitt Peak. I would also like to share with you a recent science result from Kitt Peak. This is NGC 925, an image that we released just last week. You can see the headline, Cosmic Pyrotechnics. And I'm going to get back to my script here. My apologies for this. This is our first time doing this here. This captures a snapshot of cosmic pyrotechnics. You can see the asymmetric spiral arms of the galaxy NGC 925, which hosts dazzling burst of star formation. This image is only one example of the fireworks that astronomy has to offer. The cosmic fireworks that center this image, the spiral galaxy NGC 925, resembles a vast pinwheel with a bright central bar and swirling spiral arms. The red bursts strewn throughout NGC 925 are eruptions of star formation, which can be traced by observing conspicuous hydrogen alpha emission. If you remember high school, hydrogen alpha is a color of light given off by a transition of hydrogen gas at 656 nanometers. NGC 925 lies about 20 million light years from Earth in the direction of the constellation Triangulum. Accompanying NGC 925 are a host of distant background galaxies, from striking face-on spirals to hazy ellipticals. Now let's bring on our guest, Dr. Connie Walker. Dr. Connie Walker is an astronomer who works mostly on dark skies advocacy and education. Inspired from an early age by astronauts landing on the moon and the original Star Trek series, her curiosity for anything astronomy propelled her to be the first in her family to go to college and earn a PhD. Connie's been a scientist at NOIRLab for 20 years, creating, with the education team, innovative programs on dark skies education, as well as optics and astronomy programs through inquiry and research to excite students and teachers in STEM, and then sharing the programs via workshops, talks, and events all over the globe. She holds a bachelor's degree in physics and astronomy from Smith College, a master's degree in electrical engineering and computer engineering from the University of Massachusetts, and a PhD in astronomy from the University of Arizona. A cool thing is that discovers Levy and Shoemaker named asteroid 29292 Connie Walker for her efforts in education outreach. So please let's welcome Connie Walker, and I'll let her take it away at this point. Connie?
Well, good afternoon, Rob, and good afternoon, Jamaica, and everybody out there. Yes, this is Connie, and I spent maybe 14 of the last 20 years on the dark side, trying to protect our starry night skies in a variety of ways. And I'd like to kind of talk to you about that today and how you might be able to get involved if you're so interested. So we'll talk a little bit about the importance, as Rob said, of why we should be protecting our starry night skies, and then how you can do it, and show you some examples, and get into a little bit about Globe at Night, which is a citizen science program on protecting your night sky by taking measurements. Oops, pardon me for just a second, my earbud just fell out. Technical difficulties here. So next slide, Rob. So I want to begin by imagining, if you would, the most starry night sky you have ever seen in your life. How gorgeous that is, how impressive that is, how inspiring it is. Okay, and I would suggest to you that this is something we're actually quickly losing, especially in our big cities around the globe. About 140 years ago in London, it saw the first electric streetlights, and that has technically revolutionized our culture in many, many ways. So that even on the next slide, you will see, next slide, thank you. Well, it's not advancing. There you go. Just about 20, 30 years later, after the first streetlight in London, Los Angeles, the image of the streetlights in Los Angeles is seen in that top panel. And you can see, that's taken from Mount Wilson, which is the observatory at the outskirts of LA. And then just 80 years later, in the bottom panel there, the same scale, you see how the population has grown, and with it, the number of streetlights. So it's very impressive. And the more streetlights you have, basically, the more you're going to have that glow in the sky above the city. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So finally, if you look at the world, here's an image from a satellite, and it's stitched together a number of nighttime images of the Earth. And you can see, well, let me ask you, can you tell where the countries are, basically? I mean, you can quite vividly. And the reason? Light pollution. And in this case, it's really caused by a lot of the lights that are unshielded. And some of that is maybe, I don't know, 10% or so is light that has hit the ground and been reflected upwards. But most of it comes from lights that are not shielded, so light goes everywhere, including upwards, and is totally wasted. So yes, you can see definitively how at least the definitions of the countries, if not the cities that are within the countries. Okay, next. So you say, okay, well, how does this affect me? Why should I really care about this at all? And there's a number of different ways in which light pollution personally affects your life. Okay, and I'll just mention this and then I'll go into each one a little bit more. First, you have energy, safety, and cost. You have the effects on your health and the effects on wildlife, as well as astronomical research and just your enjoyment of viewing the night sky. Let's go to the next slide. So for instance, here, you have a lot of energy waste, as I already mentioned. You have about 35% of light that's wasted, that's coming from these streetlights and going up into space where it's not used. And about $3 billion, this is the United States, each year are lost to what they call sky glow, this wasted light that goes upwards. And so about 15 million tons are in the form of carbon dioxide that are emitted each year by residential outdoor lighting and street lighting. And then, so this is equivalent to about 3 million passenger cars, and about 6 million trees would need to be planted to offset that amount of carbon emission. So there's a lot to think about, the greenhouse gases and all this stuff that we really have to consider when you're considering the effect on our environment and how much energy we're using and the cost that goes along with this. So next. Okay, well, the effects on health are many. Okay, so artificial light at night does negatively affect our health. It increases risk to obesity, depression, sleep disorders, diabetes, and a whole lot more. And there's studies going on right now on the links to a couple different types of cancer. It disrupts our day-night cycle. kind of disturbing that sleep-wake kind of pattern that we have automatically. It's called the circadian rhythm in our bodies. And our bodies naturally produce a hormone called melatonin in response to this cycle. And that is what actually, in many ways, keeps us healthy. It has antioxidant properties and induces sleep. It boosts our immune system. It lowers our cholesterol and helps functioning of the thyroid, pancreas, ovaries, adrenal glands, many things. So we owe it all basically in many ways to this hormone called melatonin. So if you have too much light at night, especially blue light at night, this suppresses the production of melatonin. So it's very necessary that if we're to stay healthy, we have to really honor that day-night cycle and keep to our sleep patterns with that environment that we're in being as dark as possible. Next, please. Now, this is a cool slide that I found that requires a tiny bit of explanation, but I think it's really has a lot of information. And what you see first are these colors, and most this whole band of colors is basically what our eyes can see visually. Now, if you can imagine that top panel being annexed on the right by that bottom panel and make one big panel across the screen, that's what it's supposed to be. And then you'll notice the numbers next. And these numbers, like Rob mentioned in the intro, 656 nanometers for hydrogen, right? Well, that's that number, 656, is within our visible range basically here, as you can see in the bottom panel. And that number denotes, if you might think of it as the size of the packet of light that you can detect at that particular color, okay? So just to put it very simply. And so those are in units of nanometers, which are, I don't know, thinner than a human hair, basically. It's 10 to the -9 meters. So it's a billionth of a meter. It's very, very small. But that's the packet of the size of the packet of light. So we have 350 on the purple blue side, 350 nanometers, and we have at the other end of the scale, 690 nanometers. Not that we are all sensitive to the ends of that spectrum, but well, some fortunate people might be, I don't know. So you can see on there now some very informative, well, some really great information. So anything that is below the 500 nanometers, you have a perception of glare. You can have discomfort glare, what they call it. It really disrupts your vision a lot. And for older people, it's much more prevalent. You have disruption in your circadian rhythm for anything below 510 nanometers. So that's where there's a lot of blue light, and you want to avoid using blue light at night, especially in your house, let alone outside. So when you're sleeping. So anything above that is a recommended range for minimizing adverse effects on blue light on the outside lights, the sky quality that you might want to have. And then also they show you that the redder you get, and they call that warmer lights for some reason. So the redder you get, the more yellow and red, those are the kind of lights you want to probably have around your household and outside your household as much as possible. So just to give you an inkling of the types of things we're talking about here, I thought I'd show that slide. Okay, we can go on. Thank you. So here's an audience that cannot speak for themselves, the wildlife, right? We actually induce many, many problems in that regard. So it's been shown through scientific studies that wildlife, including insects, amphibians, birds, fish, mammals, they need both daylight and darkness for normal functioning like we do. All artificial light during night hours can result in confusion and a change of natural instincts for these animals. These changes can include a decrease in eating, mating, or sleeping. It can also cause the animal to become more vulnerable to predators and wander into very dangerous situations. So these change, let's see, so here are some examples. There's, for instance, sea turtles in Florida. They are attracted to bright lights of hotels along the coast. So imagine the mama sea turtle has laid a clutch of maybe 100 eggs on shore and something that's maybe a foot deep. And then these hatchlings hatch. And when they do, not all the sea turtles will actually return to the ocean. They'll be influenced or to go towards the hotels, the bright lights in the hotels. So they follow the bright city lights and they wander into maybe local streets and freeways. And this, of course, results sometimes in death for the hatchlings, for the mother sea turtle. And as a result, many of these sea turtles have become actually endangered species. And then we have another example of migrating birds. They often get very misguided by bright city lights and they land in the cities instead of where they're supposed to be going. And this causes an overpopulation of the birds and an underpopulation actually of the food supply. And many of these birds do die. And if starvation doesn't kill them, then oftentimes the city chemicals and cars do. And then it's well known that these birds fly into bright light lit buildings at night, causing them to actually, of course, die basically. And it's estimated that about 1 million birds in the United States die each way this year. Okay. Hey, Rob, next slide. Okay. So, and of course we have the effects on viewing the night sky for both the public, just, enjoying the evening view of a starry night sky, and for astronomers doing research, because that glow of the night sky doesn't allow for great sensitivity, which, usually is what they're aiming toward to get to very, very far away objects. Okay, and we can have the next slide, I think. Thank you. Okay, so the biggest one to me in a lot of ways is the effect on our cultural heritage. And if you can imagine for a moment there, that, how a starry night sky has influenced so many artists, not just astronomers, but artists like Van Gogh painting Starry Night, or Holtz composing the musical composition, The Planets, right? Or Shakespeare and his various sonnets that have to do with the sun and the moon and things like that. The night has profoundly affected them and inspired them to do all of these things. And it would be a real shame if we lose that kind of inspiration and that encouragement of imagination in our future generations. Okay. Next slide, please. So, in short, light pollution not only impedes astronomical research, which is why astronomers really want to protect the night sky, but you should want to protect it too, because you have a right to see a starry night sky and to preserve that culture and to create, more inspiration for future generations, and to minimize safety issues and the effect on human circadian sensitivities and disruptions of ecosystems and wasting billions of dollars each year in energy consumption. And you can do that. But how do we, on a mass level, how do we really change the mindset of a society that really is bent on changing the night into day? Because that's what they're used to. They may not know that how it affects people's lives to have this light pollution. So that's the question. How do we change the mindset of society? So go ahead. Thank you. So it's really easy. Of all the light pollutions, if all the pollutions that are out there, air pollution, water pollution, of all those kinds of pollutions that are out there, light pollution is actually the easiest to redress or to fix. Okay, and here's some ways that IDA suggests that you fix them. And IDA is the International Dark Sky Association, and they are the pundits of all things that have to do with light pollution and how to mitigate it. So if you ever want to go and know more about light pollution and how to prevent it or mitigate it, I would suggest that you go to darksky.org. Okay, here are some of the suggestions that they state. One is light only what you need and actually where you need it. So you may not need so many lights out front. You may have 12 of them out there and you only need 3, right? Then you want to use the energy efficient bulbs and make it only as bright as you need it. Don't make it over bright in your area, okay? And then I think very importantly, you want to shield them. You want to shield these lights so that they're shielded on the top and on the sides, and the only direction the light can go is down, basically. And that works quite well. And then you want to maybe use it only when you need it. So you have a timer on, and you may elect to shut all your lights off at 10 o'clock p.m. at night or earlier, right? You certainly don't need it at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because hopefully you'll be asleep, right? So you're saving energy too in the process. So a lot of good things in those 5 steps. And if you're so inclined, become an IDA member. It's really worth it. And it's a very minimal cost. Next slide, please. So just to drive in the point, because one of my pet peeves is shielding lights. And I think that is ultimately one of the most important things. And this is a good graphic that shows you if you have, for instance, a globe light in the bottom left panel there, it's not going to allow you to see much of the night sky at all in terms of the stars. But as you shield better and better and better, as you go to the right in that panel, that image, you will see not only where you need it lit, but also a beautiful night sky. So it's a definite win-win situation for very little effort. Okay, next. Thank you. Okay, so what else can you do? This is when I want to talk about Globe at Night, which again is a citizen science program that invites everybody to measure their night sky brightness and to submit their observations to a website from a computer or a smartphone. And I'll go into that little detail a little later on, but anybody at any age can really participate. We suggest 8 and older, but and it's a 10-day campaign each month. And this 10-day campaign actually changes from month to month because of the lunar cycle. So we want it basically when it's dark in the first half of the night. And that's typically when you have a 3rd quarter moon. It doesn't rise until late in the night. And then to new moon. So those 10 days approximately are when it's really fantastic. So you don't have the moon as a light bulb in your night sky. You just have, the night, and you can take globe at night measurements. So we've had 210,000 measurements from over 180 different countries in the last 14 years or so. Okay, so my intro, and I want you to know one more thing there. If you look at those little dots that are in the map for Europe at the top and the map for the United States at the bottom, I know they look kind of small, but you can see a conglomerate of color, basically, and a lot of them are hovering above the major cities, so where it's very densely populated, and a lot of them are yellow. And that's significant. If you go to that little legend on the upper left-hand part of the slide, you will see a set of 7 colors. And the one that's very, very yellow or very, very white at the very top are the brightest measurements, so bright cities. Bright city lights. And if you see any, such as in the western half of the United States, you'll see dark dots. That designates a very dark sky. So that's our gradation from something that is very bright. And you'll see charts number 1 be very bright, and chart number 7 will be like in the national parks where it's very dark. So we'll talk more about that. Next slide, please. So here you go. I wanted to boast about a couple different countries that are really doing so phenomenal. So we have close to 20,000 measurements this year alone, the last just few months, just 2020, and that's it. So from one country of those almost 20,000 measurements, we have over 7,500 coming from Australia. And there was a very, very special event on June 21st, on the longest day of the year for them, longest night, I should say, for them in the Southern Hemisphere. It's the shortest in the Northern, but longest in the Southern. They took advantage of that long night, and they made this huge campaign to get the Guinness Book of World Records recognition for the most measurements in one night, in this case, of Globe at Night. And they succeeded. In that one night from Australia, they got like 6,700 measurements just in that one night out of the 750. 7,500, excuse me. And so kudos to Australia and the, let's see if I can say this, Australasian Dark Sky Alliance. They're the ones that hosted the event, and they were amazing. Kudos to them. And our number 2 country, yay, it's the United States in the next slide. There we go. And US is usually #1, but you know, Australia beat them this time. Thank you. So we have to catch up again, guys, and in the United States. So you can see that the measurements that were done are mostly from cities. So anywhere you look, from New York or Washington, D.C., actually all the way up to Boston, there on the right-hand side. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Can you see my cursor, Jamika? Probably not.
No,
that's okay. Oh, too bad. That's okay. So on the upper right-hand side, there's a whole bunch of yellow dots, and that's where it goes from Washington, D.C. up to Boston, basically, all through New York. And there are a lot of measurements that are basically very bright skies. And then you can see other cities, like in the middle of the country, in the lower part, you can see Dallas and Houston, and probably this San Antonio area. And then you can see Denver in the middle of the mountains there, and the western part. Go up a little bit. There you go, right there. And then, of course, the West Coast, you can see San Francisco and Los Angeles. And of course, Seattle, which actually has, I think, the most measurements of any city in the United States. Kudos to Seattle. So, and then you see some dark dots in the western part where there are national parks, basically. So, anyways, next slide. The third and last one I'll show you about the countries is actually very unique. This is one of the Canary Islands. There's like 5 Canary Islands, basically. And this is one of them, the major ones. And it's only a little over 700 square kilometers, this island. And yet it took over 3,300 measurements this year alone. So in the first 6 months of this year, 3,300 measurements. They had a campaign and they really did a great job. So they are part of Spain. Spain gets the credit, but I'm telling you, it's really this island, and they are inspirational, because if they can do it, we can do it. Right. Next slide, please. Okay, this is another one of those maps. There's a chart you go, oh, Connie, really? No, but it's kind of a neat comparison of different scales that show brightness. And what I want to first show you, if Rob can put his cursor on the visible magnitude one, and you'll see the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And those are going to be equivalent to the charts I'm going to show you in a little while. Those charts are the ones that are used in Globe at Night. And the chart number 1 will be like you see in New York City, where you're only going to see a couple stars. Chart number 7 is going to be like in the national parks, where you're going to see thousands of stars, okay, for the whole sky, basically. And you can see that too. If you look to your right of that, the number of visible stars in your hemisphere, you will see the number of stars that you can see according to those charts. So like for chart 1, you only see about 10 stars. For chart 3, you'll see about 100 stars. For chart 5, 1,000 or so almost. And chart 7, well, it's like 7,000 stars, okay? And that's a really cool thing to think about. So, and it also relates chart 5 and better, so 5, 6, and 7, you will see, as it says in the middle, the visibility of the Milky Way, you will see the Milky Way better and better and better as the sky gets darker. Now, the last 2 on the left-hand side are kind of cool too. The one at the far left says Factor to Natural Sky. So if you are out in a national park, you're gonna not really see anything but a beautiful natural dark night sky. But if you move to like a city with a magnitude of 3, you're gonna have only about 100, a factor of 100 worse conditions. So if you could move your cursor back up to, there it is, 100. Yeah, so your sky is gonna be 100 times worse than a natural night sky. Of course, if you're in New York City, it's gonna be more like 1,000 times worse. So that just gives you sort of a feeling for what we're talking about in terms of the influence or the effect of light pollution on our lives. The last little chart there that says sky brightness is has to do with something you might have available to you called the Sky Quality Meter. And I know now a number of libraries on the continental US actually have a program where they lend the Sky Quality Meters out. And I know a lot of amateur astronomers have it, and a few professional astronomers have these, and I'll show you what it is in the next slide. But their scale goes from a very bright scale of 14 down to a very dark sky scale of 22, 23, as you can see on that chart there. It's the second one from the left. And so the bigger the number, just like with magnitudes, the darker your sky. That's basically what it says there. And it allows you, if you look in the next slide, this little device called the Sky Quality Meter allows you to objectively take measurements, basically, other than just using your eyes. So globe at night, when you do take measurements, you have the option of doing it with just your eyes, which is great because you don't require any instrumentation. You just go out, get your eyes dark adapted, and that's what you want to do. So you don't want to take measurements right from the start. You want to stop and just look at the night sky, let your eyes get dark adapted, wait at least 10 minutes, sometimes 15, sometimes 20, depending on how good your eyes are. I think I'm trying to say as you get older, you might have to wait a little longer. But as soon as you're dark adapted, the measurement, it takes like 30 seconds and you're done. And I'll tell you more about those measurements in just a second. But if you also have a sky quality meter, you can also put that into your globe at night measurement app. So you just press that button. You make sure you're holding it above your head first. You press that button and you make sure there's no obstruction of anything overhead. And that sensor at the very top will show a number on that display. And hopefully it's a very high number that's toward 22, but you never know, right? If you're in a city, it's going to be more like 16 or 18 at best at the outskirts of the city, typically. Okay, next slide. So, okay, Connie's showing you another graph. This is a histogram of the distribution of those numbers I just talked about, which are the how bright a particular location will be. In this case, it's for various cities, basically in Australia. So there are maybe 600 locations in cities across Australia, not the whole continent, mind you, but just where they took the measurements that were so bright. They had a magnitude of 1, basically, or chart number 1, which is very, very bright. But lucky for them, a lot of places that are maybe 1,300 measurements showed a brightness of 4, number 4, magnitude 4 actually, and that's amazing. That's pretty good. And then they had a number of darker measurements too. So compared to our next slide, this is a lot better than what you see in the next slide, which is the US, which had a lot more measurements in the bright kind of end of our measurements here, and far fewer in the darker skies. But again, most of these measurements were taken in cities, and it doesn't sample the entire country. It just samples cities and across the country. And those, I'm sorry, those little boxes at the bottom that are red should have been arrows in either direction. Sorry about that. It kind of didn't copy over, I guess. Next, please. And the last one is that one on the island, which again, it did show a lot at what they call magnitude 3 or chart 3. That's kind of unusual to me because you have a mountain very close to where the measurements were taken, on which they have an observatory there on the Canary. It's La Palma, the island of La Palma, basically, in the Canary Islands. So I'm sure if they went around the island and took more around the island, it would have had some darker measurements here. Next. So just kudos to Tokyo, which, as you can see, has mostly bright measurements. So it's a very bright city, and it's those little yellow dots are scattered all over the city. Next. Another salute to Laban, Croatia. Both Tokyo and Laban and the next city that you'll see are ones that do measurements every single year. And here we have Montevideo, who usually have at least 1,200 measurements, and they're well on their way there. And that's in Uruguay. So I picked a city in 3 different continents, basically, that are very great at taking measurements for globe at night. Next, please. And I just wanted to show you a little bit some of those charts before it gets too late in the game here. Here's the 2 constellations that we're using mostly in the Northern Hemisphere. I don't have time to show everything, but Scorpio is the one that I would, that Globe at Night suggests to use for the Southern Hemisphere. And that's an absolutely gorgeous constellation. And you can very vividly see the tail of the scorpion out at night. And from some locations in, the southern part of the US, you can see Scorpio as well. But here on the Northern Hemisphere, you want something that's mostly overhead. And right now, basically, Hercules is winning in terms of being more directly overhead for most of the continental US. And you can see him sort of upside down here with respect to Hercules. And what you'll notice is that both constellations, this is the thing to note, if you go outside and you want to find them, there are two immensely bright, well, it should be bright stars in your night sky. At Vega, one of the brightest stars, and then Arcturus, okay? And so those two constellations will fall between those two stars. And Arcturus is actually part of Boötes. So next slide, please. So you can see if you had a chart 1, which has the faintest star you can see as a magnitude of what they call magnitude 1. So that's a bright star. So you're only seeing the very brightest stars, nothing more, right? And then, so if you go to, I think the next slide shows you where the constellations fall between those two for chart 1, just to show you again. And if you go to chart 2, you're seeing a little more stars appear. So they're going to a fainter star with a limiting magnitude of 2. And we just call it chart 2. Chart 3, again, you see some more. Now, as we go to chart 4, your scale is going to change. Oh yeah, you're seeing that, sorry. You're going to see, okay, so you see, Rob, can you point out Vega? It's on the left-hand side of that, there you go. And then Arcturus, please, on the other side of the map. There you go. So those are the two stars you want to find the constellation between again. And go one more slide, if you would, Rob. Yeah. So for chart 4, we've changed scales now. So we've zoomed in a factor of 2, basically, because you have more stars to deal with now. And you can begin to see, Rob, are you familiar with the keystone is for Hercules? It looks like a trapezoid, if you can point that out. Toward the middle where the line is. Yeah, there you go. The keystone's right there. That's pretty much the center of Hercules. And then starting with Arcturus, can you show the kite shape for Boötes? Oops, where's your cursor there? For some reason, your cursor.
I didn't know there's going to be a quiz.
Well, yeah, there you go. Thanks. So you have the kite shape of Boötes that goes to the left and upper portion from Arcturus. There you go. Down again. There you go. So that's most of the body of Boötes. Okay, so that's what you're trying to look for when you're observing for Globe at Night. Next slide, please. And as you go to chart 5, notice how you have more stars. And then you can also see Corona Borealis there in the very center between the two constellations. You see the little circle? Yeah, you got it. You got it. Yeah, sorry about that, Rob. I didn't mean to test you. Next one, please. It's chart 6. You see even more stars. And then chart 7, if you're lucky enough to be in an incredibly dark site, probably in the heart of a national park somewhere where there's no surrounding lights, you might be lucky enough to see that many stars where you can't really even tell where the constellation is anymore because there's so many stars. So I guess we can go on to the next one. So here you have it, guys. You have the app, and you go to globeatnight.org, and you just hit on the upper right, a little tab that says report, and you will see exactly what you see in front of you for the first one. If you can circle the first phone that, yep. You'll see a question for if you have your smartphone. It's gonna do something really incredible. It's gonna, well, it's not that incredible, but it is to me. It's gonna put in your time, your date, and your location in one fell swoop, especially, now this is important, guys, because when you get on there, it's going to ask you, will you allow us to use your location? And it's not like we're going to tell the world where you live, nothing like that at all. All that is asking is for us to access the GPS so that your location and of course time and date go into the app right here automatically, and you don't have to input them. But if you have to, you know the time, you know the date, And your location, all you have to do is either put your street address or the nearest crossroads that you're at, nearest two streets that meet. Or if you're at the Eiffel Tower in Paris, you put Eiffel Tower and it's gonna find exactly where you are. So no sweat on that. It'll transform that into latitude and longitude for the database. And the cool thing too is that you can go into night mode quite easily, right? So there you have this option. It'll tell you, ask you at the top if you want to put it in like night version or something, and it'll be pinkish instead of bright white. And then of course, it asks you on the third bin down there, how dark is your night sky? And that there is you can see there's 7 or so little squares at the very bottom. And once you click on one of those, it's going to show the big picture above it. And if you can, your task is not to count stars. Oh boy, no. If you're in New York City, that's no problem. But if you're in the national parks, that would be, you'd be there more than all night, right? Kind of, you don't want to do that at all. You're just being asked to match your picture in one of those 7 pictures with what you see. So you're looking for the faintest star that you can see and seeing if it's in your image, your picture, in your chart there, right? And when you find that there's a match between what you see in the night sky and that image on your app, then you've got your measurement. Leave it there. That's all you have to do. And then they ask you, it gives you 4 pictures for the sky conditions. And of course, hopefully you're not observing when it's really cloudy, because of course you're not going to get any measurements really that are worthwhile. So hopefully it's near clear or clear. So one of the first 2 pictures, hopefully, that your conditions are for observing. There are 2 places you can comment on the sky and your location, but you don't have to if you don't want to, so no problem. And then you're ready to submit. Now, if you have a sky quality meter, you can put that in there first. So there's the place where you put your measurement, and really all you need is your number for your measurement. That's all you really need. And then you can hit that number, that button that says submit at the bottom of the screen for part 6, and you're done. And literally that takes you less than 30 seconds. And if you want to do another measurement, please feel free. And we would very much appreciate it. And that's all it is to reporting your observations. It's extremely easy, very user-friendly. If we could go to the next slide, please. Okay. So some people ask me quite frequently, actually, what is the data used for? Why do we have to do this, right? A lot of it is just monitoring over time to see when things get worse. And if then you really have to do something about it, or even beforehand doing something about it would be better. But it's a good way to monitor over time how conditions are changing. Some people like to compare it to population density and to see how that correlates. Or a lot of people like to use it for lighting surveys around town to see how dark or how bright a light allows it to be. Because there's certain lights like phosphor-coated amber LEDs that are extremely good. There's a different, so the lighting survey would probably show that those kind of lights are a whole lot better than halide lights or halogen lights or a lot of other kinds of white, very, very, very white LEDs that have blue content. I mean, those are the ones you want to avoid. So a lot of people do lighting surveys to see what needs changing around their cities. Then there are the quest, I guess, for dark sky oases. And a lot of it is, again, for like this town in Norman, Oklahoma, just knocked the socks off for me. They did this, they grouped together high schoolers and amateur astronomers. They took a lighting survey of their city and went before the city council and made their ordinances, the lighting ordinances, a lot stronger. So there's a lot of, with data, you can get better compliance, basically. And then you could do studies. So of animals, plants, human health, safety, security, energy consumption. We had one beautiful study that is shown here in the upper image of the bats. This was done with the Arizona Game and Fish. We followed over a dozen bats from Saguaro National Park east all the way 25 kilometers to the northwestern part of town to find out whether or not the light pollution from the city, because they were avoiding the city center, if that was something that was necessary to make the lighting laws stronger or not. And it was actually found that it was one of 3 factors and not, it was strong, equivalent to the other 2 factors, but not strong enough to change the lighting laws, basically. So it was a very interesting study. And this was done with globe at night data. So next one. So here are your dates for the remaining months of this year. And as you can tell, we have an upcoming campaign in just 4 days. And I hope that you all will take a few minutes to enjoy the night sky and to take a globe at night measurement. It's very, very easy, as we discussed. And it repeats again in August and the other months that follow. And I would like to mention that in the next slide, I think it's the next slide. Yes. Okay, so I hope that a lot of our viewers today are part of our NOIRLab, basically our observatory that's now grown to 3 locations in both Hawaii, Arizona, and Chile. And I would like to challenge our team in these 3 locations to participate in Globe at Night and see which location can acquire the most measurements in our September campaign. And the reason we chose September is because that's when it's nearest the equinox. And what that means is that in most locations all around the world, you have basically equal hours for day and night. If we had the challenge right now in this next campaign, Chile would win because its night is longer than for Hawaii and Arizona. And they start the night earlier. And so, you know, they would win hands down, I think, right, Chile? So we were trying to make it, you know, sort of the equalize for everybody and start with the, do it in September when we do have the equinox. So join us, everybody, in the NOIRLab at all 3 locations in September and take at least, please, 1 measurement, if not more. Okay, next slide, please. So I just want to mention thank you for, you know, allowing me to be part of this live streaming event for Live at NOIRLab at Kitt Peak, and being part of the first one actually for Kitt Peak. I think that's an honor, and I think together we can really protect our starry night sky, keep it a starry night sky if possible. And I leave you with this picture of Van Gogh. And when you're ready, Rob, the next slide has my contact info. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Connie. This is Jamika here from the YouTube Live audience. We do have some questions and comments. Okay, so first we have a greeting from Sabria Mosby out of Memphis, Tennessee. And also we have greetings from David Cabrera from La Serena. So we'd like to say aloha and a big welcome to all of you and all of you others who maybe did not comment but are still out there. So we are so glad to have you here with us today for our discussion on how to preserve starry night skies using the Globe at Night program here with Dr. Constance Walker. So Connie, one question from Sabria Mosby from Memphis, Tennessee is, how long would it take to reduce light pollution? Now, obviously, that would depend on the different methods using in the place, but could you give us a general idea of how effective certain things could be, certain options we put in place could be?
Wow, that's a very, very good question. That is really tailored to every individual situation, because you have cities like New York City where I'm not sure if that kind of situation will ever really be solved. You can reduce it, but I don't think you're going to reduce it to perfection. Then you have places like the national parks, which are already incredibly dark to begin with, and set the example for us. But those dark sky places are surrounded by other cities, which are encroaching on them with light pollution at the moment. So I don't know, to be honest with you, if ever we'll have it entirely solved, but we will definitely make the conditions better. We could make the conditions better. So when I gave that example, for instance, for for the city of Norman, Oklahoma, where they had these huge globe lights that were in a good portion of their university, which is at the center of town. And they were able to really rectify all that situation and make the city a bit darker. So you can make significant changes. I wouldn't be able to tell you exactly how much darker, I'm sorry at this point, but yeah, it just really does depend on the individual situation. So.
Thank you for that, Connie. That makes sense for sure. But and overall, though, just knowing that we can make a measurable, tangible, positive impact is really the most important thing.
Oh, we can take Tucson, for example, which improved, at least they changed most of their lights out in recent years to LEDs that are not very blue. They're a little bit better than that, and it reduced the light levels at least 7%. So that's not bad. I mean, that's a start, right? So that kind of thing can be quantified, yeah. And if you go to some cities like San Diego, that's made some changes. What is it? Davis, California has made changes. There's different places across the United States where changes have been made with their lights, and they have improved their light levels as a result. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Connie. And then a follow-up question, again, from Ms. Sabria Mosby here from Memphis, Tennessee. She goes on to say later in the chat, you were talking about Hercules and Boötes, and in the chat I put down that this is the constellations for the July Globe at Night program, and if anyone knew those constellations. Well, Sabria says that she doesn't really know constellations and asks, how does she learn more about them?
Oh, one of the best things, actually, they have so many of these incredible apps for your phone that are actually, some of them are actually free or just a few dollars. And they're basically planetarium programs like Star Walk or, actually, I think Rob would know a lot of them, but Star Walk is one of them. And you can get that nearly for free. You might have some little cost to it. And if you point it anywhere, you'll see which constellation is right in front of you. It's really amazing, and it'll help you actually find what you're looking for. Yes, Rob, you gonna say something?
The sky for Android is free. The sky for Android phones, and Distant Suns is another one I've used as well, in addition to Star Walk. And I believe Distant Suns is both Android and iPhone as well. So, but there are others, but those are the ones I've used the most.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate that.
And I will join in and say that I use Sky Portal by Celestron.
Oh, there you go. And they're all incredible too, because they not only show you where these constellations are, but they show you and describe various objects that are in your night sky. And they can actually alert you too, in some cases, as to things like the Perseid meteor shower in August or something. I mean, it's really beneficial to have one of these on your phone.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much to everyone in our YouTube Live audience. If you have any more questions or comments for our host, Rob Sparks, or for our science guest, Dr. Constance Walker, please go ahead and leave those in the chat, and I'll be sure that they are addressed in the description underneath the video once this is posted. And if there are no other new questions and comments in the chat, I will throw it back over to you, Rob.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Connie for joining us today, and thank you, Jamika, for moderating our session today. Just want to give one quick announcement. This is our new time for Live from NOIRLab, Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Tucson time, which would be 4 o'clock in Chile, and 10 a.m. Hawaii. We do that so that no one has to get up too early in the morning or stay up too late at any of our facilities when we do this. So we're going to do this from all 3 locations now. Next week, we're going to have a live from NOIRLab at CTIO in Chile, and we'll have Manuel Paredes talking about big data in education next week. So we hope you can join us then. So without any further ado, is there anything else that Connie or Jamika would like to say?
No, thank you, everybody. Join us on Globe at Night.
Yes, join us in Globe at Night, and remember we have the Connie's issuing a challenge in September, so the Northern and Southern Hemisphere will have roughly the same length nights to make it an even contest. So, okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again next week.